My name is Rose Henderson, and for most of my 63 years, I thought I understood family. Down here in Willow Creek, folks still wave from their porches. The church bell rings on Sundays, and everybody knows who baked which casserole for the potluck. I raised my only son, Daniel, in that same rhythm: work hard, tell the truth, and call your mama every Sunday. When his daddy passed away 10 years ago, it was just me and Daniel. I poured every ounce of love, time, and savings into that boy. College, first apartment, even a used car with a bow on top. Mama handled it all. He used to joke, "Mama, you're my #1 investor." And I'd laugh because I believed the dividends of love always come back around. For a while, they did. Daniel called nightly from college, sent selfies with his roommates, and signed every text, "Love you, Ma." When he met Amber, I thought, finally someone to share his heart with. She was polite at first, soft voice, perfect posture, the kind of girl who says ma'am like she means it. I took her to lunch at Dixie Diner, and she even offered to split the check. I remember thinking, this one's raised right. But honey, masks are light things, they slip the moment the heat turns up. After Daniel graduated, the visits grew shorter, the calls quieter. He'd drive down for Sunday dinner, but his eyes stayed on his phone. Amber tagged along sometimes, but she'd sit there scrolling recipes like she was too good for cornbread. When I asked about their plans, she'd smile that frozen smile. "We're just taking things slow, Miss Henderson," I told her. "Sweetheart, slow is fine, but make sure you're heading somewhere." It started with money. Daniel called one night, voice all hesitant. "Ma, our rent went up. Amber lost a shift. Could you help for a few months?" Of course I could. I wired the money before he finished his sentence. Then another month, and another. Before long, a few months turned into 3 years of me covering their rent. I didn't mind, he was my baby. Besides, I told myself, once they're married and stable, he'll pay me back, or at least invite me to Sunday dinner in their fancy apartment. But Amber never called to say thank you, not once. Last spring, I noticed Daniel's tone had changed. Short replies, no video calls. When I asked if they'd picked a wedding date, he mumbled something about keeping it simple. I sent him my grandmother's lace veil in a pretty box, thinking maybe it'd spark excitement. He texted back a single heart emoji. That was all. 2 months later, our phone conversations stopped altogether. I left voicemails, sweet patient ones at first, then a little sharper. "Danny, it's Mama. Just checking you're eating right, baby. Daniel James Henderson. I'm starting to worry. Call me." No reply. Even Pastor Lewis asked about him during Sunday service. "Haven't seen your boy lately, Sister Rose." I smiled and said he was busy with work, but inside I felt the kind of ache that keeps you up counting ceiling cracks. Then came that Thursday morning. Sunlight spilled through my kitchen window, catching the dust like glitter. I was mixing pancake batter when my phone rang. A known number. City area code. I answered with a cheerful, "Good morning, this is Rose." Amber's voice slid through the speaker, smooth, cool, sugar-coated poison. "Hi, Ms. Henderson. I just wanted to let you know that everything went beautifully." "Everything?" I asked, wiping flour from my hands. "The wedding," she said. "Daniel and I got married yesterday." I thought I'd misheard. The whisk slipped from my fingers, batter splattering across the counter. "You what?" "We got married. It was a small ceremony. Just close friends." My throat tightened, but I'm his mother. "We didn't want to make a big fuss," she said. "We'll send photos soon. Anyway, I hope you're doing well." Click. Just like that. I stood there in my kitchen staring at the phone, heart pounding louder than the refrigerator hum. Married, without me. After everything I'd done, word travels faster than firewood gossip in Willow Creek. By that afternoon, half the town knew before I'd even processed it. Miss Evelyn from the bakery came by with sympathy muffins. "I just can't believe they didn't invite you." "Rose," she said, eyes wide like saucers. Neither could I. That night, I scrolled through Facebook until I found the post. Amber in a white dress, Daniel in a gray suit, both smiling beneath a floral arch. Caption: "Married my best friend. #forever." Aunt Clara commented, "Where's Mama Rose?" No reply. Someone else wrote, "Beautiful ceremony," and I felt my stomach twist. The worst part, I recognized the venue. It was 15 minutes from my house. 15 minutes, they could have swung by for a hug. I didn't cry right away. I baked a batch of biscuits instead, my nervous ritual. But halfway through, I saw the empty chair across the table and lost it. The sobs came raw, tearing through me until my apron was soaked. Every memory flashed: the scraped knees I'd bandaged, The graduation photo on my fridge, the rent receipts filed neatly in my drawer, love receipts, every one of them. When the tears dried, anger took their place. Hot, righteous anger. If they wanted a life without me, they could damn well pay for it themselves. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank, and canceled every automatic transfer tied to Daniel's account. Rent, utilities, phone plan all gone. The next morning, I mailed a short note. Congratulations on your marriage. Consider this my final gift. Love, Mama. By Sunday, the phone rang again. This time, it was Daniel, first time in months. Ma, what did you do? Our landlord said the rent didn't go through. Oh, I said, stirring my coffee. I assumed your wife would handle it now that y'all are married. Amber's furious. She says you're trying to embarrass us. Embarrass you. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut butter. Son, you managed that just fine without me. Ma, please, we'll pay you back. I cut him off. You won't need to, Daniel. I'm done being your bank. You're a husband now. Start acting like one. He went quiet, breathing heavy on the line. Then came a whisper I'd never heard from him before. Fear. Amber says she's gonna call a lawyer if you mess with our finances. I smiled to myself. Let her. I've kept every receipt, baby. That night, I opened my cedar chest and pulled out the folder labeled Daniel Rent Support. Every transfer, every date, neatly printed. I stacked them on the dining table like playing cards. If Amber wanted to play games, Auntie Rose could play better. As I stared at the pile, a calm settled over me, not sadness, not rage, but the steady kind of peace that comes before a storm. You planned to steer yourself. They thought they could erase me from their story, while I was about to write a new chapter of my own. The next morning, before the sun had even fully pulled itself over the pines, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting company. Nobody knocks on Auntie Rose's door that early, unless the air's heavy with trouble. I opened it to find Mr. Caldwell, our landlord's brother, standing on my porch in his work boots, and a worried crease between his brows. Morning, Rose, he said, shifting from one foot to the other. Is Daniel home? No, I said, palms cool, from the sink. He's busy. Mr. Caldwell glanced past me, toward the kitchen window where my rent folder sat like a small altar. You wouldn't happen to have a few minutes? I just wanted to check on something about the Henderson account. I stepped aside and invited him in. He carried a thick envelope and a look that said he'd rather be fixing fences than delivering news. We sat at the kitchen table, me, with my still hot coffee, and him, with his worry tucked into his jacket. You canceled the transfers, didn't you? He asked, not unkindly. I did, I said simply. I wanted to see what would happen when the people I helped had to step up. Mr. Caldwell's mouth tightened. Your son told us they were having trouble. I'm sorry, Ms. Rose. It's just, well, the rent's due, and if it doesn't come through, we're in a bind. I nodded. I know how the world works, Clyde. People get sloppy. I've been cleaning the mess for 3 years. Today I let them sweep their own corners. He looked at me with something like pity and something like admiration. You always were a strong one. Before he left, he handed me a small note. If you ever want these receipts back, I can help. Don't let them push you around. I folded the paper into my palm and felt its weight. That little piece of human decency breathed courage into me. By midday, rumor did what it always does, grew teeth, and found the town square. Pastor Lewis stopped by with a casserole and an expression that asked more than his lips did. He sat me down and said, Rose, your family, to half this town. You don't have to go it alone. That afternoon, I took my folder, every bank statement, every transfer confirmation, every note where Daniel had written, "Thanks, Ma," in the memo, and I made copies. Not for the lawyers or for social media, not yet. I made copies for myself and for the people who mattered. Pastor Lewis, Mr. Caldwell, and Miss Evelyn from the bakery, who'd always known where my heart kept its biscuits. Call it old-fashioned, call it sensible. I planned to set the record straight where it would mean something, in front of people who'd seen us grow. I wanted witnesses. By Saturday, our church's community hall filled with folding chairs and a soup pot simmering on the stove. I didn't announce anything. Word spread the way good gossip does in Willow Creek. Gentle, persistent folks drifted in, carrying pies and concern. Faces I'd known since diapers looked up at me like I'd been a lighthouse that had suddenly dimmed. When I stood up to speak, I felt my knees steady. The hush in that room wrapped around me like a shawl. I'm not here for money, I began. I'm here because I need people to know how easy it is to forget the hands that fed you. I need folks who know Daniel's story to tell the truth. I laid the copies on the table, one by one. These are the receipts. I paid their rent 3 years. I trusted them. I loved them. Murals of murmurs rose up, then quieted. Mrs. Carter, who sang in the choir, wiped her eyes. Mr. Hargrove, who rarely said a kind thing, shook his head into his hand. The room felt like a jury and a sanctuary both. Someone suggested I post the receipts online. Someone else frowned at the thought. Don't make a spectacle, they said. I shrugged. This wasn't spectacle. This was evidence. If the world was going to say my son didn't need me anymore, I would at least make sure the record showed what I'd given. On Sunday afternoon, when the church had emptied and we were folding him, I heard a sharp, halting knock at the church office. It was Umber. Of course, it was Umber, the woman in the Facebook photo, the one with the smile that didn't touch her eyes. She walked in like she owned the room, and stood there with a face like porcelain, hands clenched on a purse strap. "Auntie Rose," she said, voice practiced soft. "We need to talk." I didn't rise. I sat back and folded my hands like a judge about to issue a sentence. "About what?" I asked, voice careful. She breathed in like she was rehearsing for an aria. "About the receipts you showed at the potluck. About the way you humiliated us. You put our private life on display." Humiliated. The word stung, but what made it sour was how her mouth shaped it, like I was the wrongdoer. I set down my hymn book and looked at her properly for the first time, not the brittle image of her Facebook page, but the person who had chosen to step into our family. "You mean the receipts that show I kept my son's roof over his head for 3 years?" I asked. My voice was gentle, but the words landed like a clap. Amber's nostrils flared. "You should have called us, Rose. You don't get to play judge." I leaned forward. I tried to call. I tried to talk. "You ignored him when I reached out. You thought you could rearrange our family story without me. You thought you could erase me." Her jaw worked. For a beat, she looked like a woman who'd been caught without her script. "And what do you want, Amber?" I asked. "An apology? A cake? Or do you want us to pretend you didn't stand me at the door?" She straightened, shoulders tight. "We want the receipts back." I let out a laugh, low and unexpected. "You want the receipts, darling. Those aren't trophies for you to hide in a drawer. Those are proof that I loved my son when it was easier not to." Amber's face changed, then surprise, then something like quiet fury. "If you post those online, if you continue to shame us, I will post nothing unless you force me," I said. And the words were simpler than the storm inside me. "But if you keep courting lawyers and threats, then people will see the truth, and you will answer for your choices." Her mouth opened, as if to say something that would pull the ground from under me, but instead she left single stately steps down the church hall, a silhouette of denial. That week, a neighbor's suite, Mrs. Donnelly, brought over a newspaper clipping about tenant rights. Another neighbor showed up with an affidavit form, handshaken and polite. The town was beginning to lean, quietly, like a tree under wind, toward my side. On Friday morning, my mailbox held a letter not from a lawyer, but from a small legal clinic in the county. "We help elders and families with disputes," it read. "We saw your post in the community newsletter. If you need counsel, come by." I read the note twice, then left it on the table next to my rent receipts. The network I had built, church, bakery, landlord, was offering more than pity. It was offering structure. It was offering a way to put my name back where it belonged. At night, when the house hummed and the world softened, I would sit with the folder and imagine the scene I wanted. Not the screaming matches or the lawsuits, but a public truth, the kind that presses a clean finger against a bruise and says, "This happened." I wanted accountability, not vengeance. I wanted my story told so my grandchildren would never think that generosity was a weakness. They thought they could erase me with a hashtag and a staged smile. They were wrong. And as I folded the receipts, thinking of the hard days ahead, there was a knock on my door that made my heart jump one sharp, urgent, like the beat of a drum announcing the start of something. I opened it to find Pastor Lewis with his hat in his hands and a look on his face that meant the whole town was watching. "We need to decide," he said. "Are we going to let this pass, or are we going to stand with you?" I looked out past his shoulder to the line of oaks, to the church steeple, to the little house where the man I'd raised lived with the woman who'd snubbed me. My hand closed around that folder like a promise. "We stand," I said. For 2 nights after Pastor Lewis's visit, I barely slept. Every creak of the porch boards sounded like old ghosts pacing, waiting for me to decide how far I was willing to go. By Sunday dawn, I'd made up my mind. If they wanted to handle this in daylight they would get. On Monday, the mail truck stopped in front of my house. The driver waved an envelope in the air like it was too hot to hold. Certified letter, Miss Rose. I signed and opened it right there on the porch. Inside was a crisp, officious letter from Greer and Associates, attorneys, printed on paper thick enough to slice butter. Dear Miss Henderson, our clients, Daniel and Amber Henderson, request that you cease public dissemination of any private financial documents and remove any statements that could cause reputational harm. I had to read it twice before I laughed. Reputational harm, I said to the hydrangeas. Baby, the harm's in the truth. Still, that letter lit something in me, not fear, but resolve. I put on my Sunday best, slipped the notice into my purse, and drove 20 minutes to the county courthouse where the Laclade Clinic kept its office. The clinic smelled of coffee and paper dust. Behind a chipped desk sat Lena Ramirez, a young attorney with fierce eyes and a silver cross at her throat. I'm not here for money, I told her. I'm here for peace. She listened while I laid out everything: the rent receipts, the sudden wedding, the letter. When I finished, she tapped the papers into a neat stack. They can't stop you from keeping records, she said. You have every right to document what you paid and to defend yourself if they defame you. I repeated. Lena nodded. If they're telling people you're unstable or vengeful, that's defamation. But we won't sue. We'll set the record straight. Let the community see the facts. She helped me draft a simple statement. I, Rose Henderson, supported my son and his wife for 3 years. All payments were voluntary and documented. I wish them well but will no longer provide financial assistance. Nothing cruel, nothing false, just sunlight. When we finished, Lena smiled. Truth has better legs than gossip, Miss Rose. It walks farther. I left that office lighter, holding the official stamp like armor. 2 days later, Pastor Lewis called. Rose, he said, the council's holding an open forum on community disputes. Maybe you ought to come. By Thursday evening, the church hall was packed. The smell of fried chicken mingled with tension. Folks pretended to study their hymn books, but everyone knew why they were there. Even the mayor had shown up in his Sunday coat, though it was only Thursday. When my name was called, I walked to the front, folder in hand. My knees didn't shake this time. I'm not here to shame anyone, I began. I'm here to remind y'all that love isn't a loan you can default on in secret. It's a partnership, and partnerships require respect. I read Lena's statement, plain and steady. No names beyond my own, no accusations, just facts and the quiet strength of a woman, finished with silence. When I was done, the room was so still I could hear the ceiling fan clicking. Then Miss Evelyn stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. Rose Henderson's done more for this town than half of us combined, she said. She's earned her say. Applause started like rainlight, uncertain, and grew into thunder. Even the mayor nodded, his tie askew. That's when I saw them in the door, with Daniel and Amber, standing just inside the hall, both pale as candle wax. Daniel's eyes darted between me and the crowd, like he couldn't decide which way to run. He stepped forward. Mama, he said, voice breaking the hush. Can we talk? I hesitated. Every cell in me wanted to run into his arms, but I stayed rooted. We can talk, I said, but we'll do it honest, in the open. Amber's fingers tightened around his sleeve. Daniel, not here, she hissed. But he pulled free. No, Amber here. The room held its breath. Daniel turned to the crowd. My mama's right. She helped us. I was embarrassed we couldn't make it on our own. I thought keeping the wedding small would spare her the cost, but I see now it spared me the shame. He looked at me, tears glossing his eyes. I'm sorry, Mama. 100 shoulders eased at once. Even Amber lowered her gaze. The apology wasn't perfect, but it was public. And sometimes that's enough. I stepped closer, touched his cheek like I used to when he scraped his knee. Baby, apology accepted, I said softly, but don't mistake forgiveness for forgetfulness. You've got to earn back what you lost. The crowd murmured approval, and Pastor Lewis closed the meeting with a prayer that sounded more like a benediction for boundaries than a sermon. Later that night, back home on my porch, I watched fireflies blink across the yard and thought about how justice doesn't always wear a judge's robe. Sometimes it's just truth standing tall in a room full of whispers. The phone buzzed. Daniel again. The text read, I'll start sending you the rent money you covered, month by month. It's the least I can do. I smiled. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But I didn't need it anymore. What I'd wanted was my name back, and I had it. I closed the folder for good, slid it into the cedar chest, and whispered to the quiet night. That's how you teach the world to spell respite. Morning in Willow Creek has its own music, roosters crowing offbeat, screen doors slapping, a lawnmower humming somewhere down the hill. That Friday, the melody sounded softer, like the whole town had exhaled. I brewed my chicory coffee, fed the stray cat that insists he owns my porch, and tried to remember when peace had last felt this easy. When I walked down to the mailbox, the air was thick with honeysuckle. Inside the metal box sat a single envelope, cream-colored, and hand-addressed in Daniel's careful print. For a second my heart played double. I carried it inside, set it on the table, and just looked at it. Funny how paper can weigh more than stone. I slit it open with my butter knife. The letter began simply, "Dear Mama, I know sorry isn't enough, but it's where I have to start." He wrote about fear, the kind that hides behind pride. He said Amber had convinced him that distance would make him look grown, and that every time he thought of calling, shame tightened his throat. He told me the wedding had felt hollow without my laugh in the crowd, and that even Amber had cried later when she realized what they'd done. At the bottom he'd scrawled, "We're trying to do better. Dinner next Sunday. Your fried chicken, if you'll still make it." I set the letter down and let myself smile, slow and deep. Justice had done her work. Now Grace could have her turn. Sunday came hot and bright. I woke before dawn, pulled out my old cast iron skillet, and seasoned it like a ritual. The smell of frying chicken drifted down the street, probably luring half the neighborhood. I even made Amber's favorite sweet tea recipe, though I'd learned it was my recipe from years before she met my son. At 5 o'clock sharp, their car pulled into the driveway. Daniel climbed out first, looking younger somehow, humility trimming away the arrogance. Amber followed, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Awkward, brave. "Hey Mama," Daniel said. I wiped my hands on my apron. "You come in before that chicken gets cold." We ate mostly in silence at first, but not the hard kind, the kind that leaves space for mending. Halfway through, Amber set down her fork. "Miss Rose," she said, voice unsteady, "I was wrong. I thought independence meant shutting everyone out. I see now it just meant we had no roots." I nodded. "Roots are what keep you standing when storms come. Don't pull them up again." Daniel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We'll make it right, Mama." After dinner we sat on the porch, lightning bugs blinking like tiny I told them about the legal clinic, about Lena, about how truth could walk farther than gossip. Daniel laughed softly. "Only you'd turn a lawsuit into a sermon, Mama. Someone's gotta teach this town the difference between revenge and repair," I said. He grinned, that boyish grin I hadn't seen in years. "Guess that's you." When they left, the night air wrapped around me, gentle as a quilt. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The hurt had turned into a story, a true one, mine to tell, but finished. Weeks passed. People still whispered my name at the bakery and the church socials, but now it sounded different, less pity, more pride. Pastor Lewis even asked me to start a family truth group at church, where folks could talk about boundaries and blessings without shame. I called it the Porch Circle, because everything worth fixing in this town starts on a porch. Amber joined the second week. She listened more than she spoke, but when she did, her words carried weight. "I used to think families were stories you could edit," she told the circle. "Now I know you just have to read the whole chapter." I nodded. She was learning the language of accountability. Daniel helped repaint the church fence, and every Saturday he mowed my lawn without being asked. He and Amber moved into a smaller apartment, paid their own rent, and sent me photos of burnt-looking casseroles with captions like "learning." I laughed every time. A month later, another envelope arrived, this one from the legal clinic. Inside was a note from Lena. "Case closed, Miss Rose. No further claims against you. Keep standing tall." I pinned it on my fridge beside Daniel's old kindergarten drawing, the one where he'd scribbled a stick figure holding a heart bigger than its head. Life had come full circle, from scraped knees to grown-up mistakes, back to the same message: love, if tended right, can outgrow any hurt. People still stop me at the market and ask, "Rose, how did you do it without losing your temper?" I tell them the truth. Oh, I lost it plenty, but I learned that revenge burns fast, while truth glows steady. I chose the glow. Then I smile and add, "Besides, when the good Lord hands you wisdom and receipts, you use both." That usually gets a laugh. These days, my porch stays busy. Neighbors drop by for advice, teenagers for cookies, sometimes even Amber for gardening tips. I tell them stories, not all as dramatic as mine, but each with the same heartbeat. Dignity doesn't mean silence, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. When the cicadas starts their evening hymn, I rock back in my chair, look out at the road that took my boy away and brought him back again, and whisper, "We're all right, baby, we're all right." There's a saying we use down here in Willow Creek: when the storm passes, the porch still stands. Some folks think it's about weather, but the older I get, the more I know it's about people. It started small: 3 folding chairs, a pitcher of lemonade, and whoever had something heavy on their heart. The porch circle wasn't a club, it was a confession booth under the open sky. I didn't plan to lead it, I just kept the porch light on, and the people came. There was Marla, whose daughter hadn't spoken to her in years; Tommy, who'd lost his job and couldn't face his family; and sometimes even Amber, sitting quiet in the corner, taking notes in a little blue journal like she was afraid the words might fly away if she didn't trap them. We didn't solve problems. We told the truth, cried when we had to, and learned that healing sounds a lot like listening. One evening, the sky turned bruised purple with rain, and Daniel showed up with a sack of groceries and a nervous smile. The others drifted home until it was just the 2 of us, thunder low in the distance. "Mama," he said, "I still feel ashamed about everything." I looked at him, the same boy who used to hide behind my skirt at the county fair, now a man trying to unlearn pride. "Shame's a heavy coat, baby," I told him. "You can't wear it and walk free." He nodded, eyes wet. "I'm trying." "I know." I touched his hand. "The trying's what matters." After he left, I sat alone, listening to the rain ping on the tin roof. It hit me then: justice isn't a courtroom or applause. It's a moment like this, when the person who broke your heart finally learns what it cost. All those nights I'd prayed for a sign that God saw me, that my love hadn't been wasted. This was it. Not in money repaid or apologies spoken, but in the simple, steady beat of conscience returning home. Weeks later, I wrote a letter I never planned to mail. It began, "Dear Daniel, if I'd been invited to your wedding, I would have cried through the whole thing, not because I wasn't part of it, but because I would have been proud of the man I thought you were. Turns out, I still can be. You found your way back to truth, and that's worth more than any ceremony. Love, Mama." I folded the letter, slipped it between the pages of my Bible, and thought, maybe one day he'll find it after I'm gone. People think forgiveness is a light switch. You flip it and suddenly the room's bright again, but it's not. It's a candle you light every night, even when there's still smoke from yesterday's fire. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let bitterness be the loudest voice in the room. And if you're lucky, you live long enough to see the people who hurt you sit in the same quiet you once cried in and understand. These days, folks still come to my porch. They bring stories, laughter, sometimes casseroles. I don't tell them how to fix their lives. I just pour the tea and say, start from the part that hurts most, because that's where healing always begins. As the sun dips below the pines, I lean back in my rocker, feel the cool air move across my face, and whisper to the wind. I asked when the wedding is, and she said, "We got married yesterday." Funny thing is, that was the day I finally got married to my own strength. And that, my dears, is how Auntie Rose learned the truest love story of all, the one where you save yourself.